when you're a burnt out, somewhat emotionally reactive boss, and you wear your feelings on your sleeve and say things reactively to someone who puts some feedback or a new idea on the table and you punish it, say farewell to new ideas and feedback. It's not going to happen again. I think having relationships with plants is a really fundamental way of orienting. And it's like, I'd much rather be like, okay, I've just learned about this new adaptogen, like rhodiola. Great. So I'm going to try integrating rhodiola into my life. We live in a world of distractions, of really effective distractions. And the market thrives on its ability to distract, right? You know, we've got these great AI technologies that are coming up that are just brilliant at giving me a massive dopamine hit by hitting the magic button that then the sycophantic bot comes and tells me how wise and smart I am to even ask such a question, you know? And so, of course, these businesses are blowing up right now because they're really effective at getting our attention. Cocaine's a great example because, you know, the coca plant is, you know, one of the most important plants to the Andean people. As part of that, they did some research on, okay, what is this? How insidious is, you know, so they researched the plant and it turned out to be just like one of the most potent superfoods, you know, of humanity.
Now we're recording. Now we're live.
Now we got the B-roll.
We got the good mics.
Yeah, I was wondering if it's kind of like, it's, you know, extra
rolling
clips
start
for B-roll.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, with my podcast, it was just kind of like, you know, right when things were getting more heated with the pandemic and things like that. And I was just like, you know what, especially my podcast was Dignities and Disasters. And I would take, you know, highly charged topics to help people have more sophisticated conversations. It's not about what's right and what's wrong. It's like, how can you actually be useful and like usefully disagree with people, be more effective in disagreement. But I was like, you know, it's only a hop, skip, and a jump before, you know, we're really getting into territory that people are defensive about pretty severely. So I decided to take that down.
Now, I am trying to be a little bit more controversial in a thoughtful way, not pulling anybody, and anybody can, you know, evade or, but not to try to like, gotcha type of thing like that. But with and anything can be edited and it's all good. But that's, if there's just like a healthy, fun kind of banter or disagreement, if that shows, I'm trying to learn that.
Yeah.
Because that's what's more interesting to people. And I really haven't had much of that in here.
Good. Well, I look forward to seeing how it unfolds.
Yeah, me too. So we met maybe 6-8 years ago when I first moved to Boulder. I am friends with Marcus McCauley.
And Marcus's farm.
And I had moved into his commercial kitchen.
Okay.
And that's right when I started my business. And I toured his farm, and then I saw the sweat. I'm like, what's that? He's like, oh, why don't you come join us and I'll, you know, tell you more about that.
For an NEP.
Yeah. And then I saw you there and I was like, wow, the way that you first landed for me was you're stoic. You're very like calm, collected. You certainly seem to have the respect of people around you. You seemed half in corporate America, half in like this very prayerful path. And I was curious like how deep your roots were in either one of those.
Right.
It came up that I was doing this microgreens business, and then you shared how you were working with some supplements companies, natural product companies, kind of in that way. And then from there, I think I'd picked your brain maybe a few times. You'd offer me some consult, and I'd see you at Sweats, and that's about as cool a way to meet somebody as I know.
Yeah. That's a very Boulder way to make business connections.
Yeah, so that was a beautiful way to meet you. And in preparation for this podcast, I got to learn more about you and your path, and it's I'm excited to have it unfold. I'm wondering from your perspective, share it like 30,000 foot view, kind of what maybe a few key milestones or moments have been in your path to help kind of people better understand who you are.
Yeah, in 30 seconds or less. No. Good. You know, it's like helpful in a situation like this to kind of go all the way back. But I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, in what I would describe as kind of a traditional, but also very kind of modern meritocratic world. In that traditional is like I was raised, Christian Catholic, a very a strong moral framework and all of those ways. But then I went to like a big prep school in the Southeast. And so it was very much like all of my classmates from high school are, doctors and lawyers and bankers and things like that. And, I was always told kind of like how smart and capable I was. And, we could talk about fixed mindset versus growth mindset and why you shouldn't tell someone that they're really smart and also why AI is so sycophantic and how it's trained. But, that very aggressive achievement oriented community like worked for me in some ways, but not in others. There were just other parts of myself that weren't um, getting the attention they needed. And so I hightailed it out to Boulder, Colorado right after high school, to come out to CU Boulder Engineering School was the excuse. But I often say I came out on the gold rush that someone said there was something special in Boulder, or maybe it was what they were smoking or something. But like, I just needed to get out into a different landscape. And of course, through studying kind of like integral philosophy, it was kind of like, the more progressive postmodern consciousness, I think is what I was attracted to, which of course grew out of the inadequacies of the modern worldview. So I'm kind of diving straight into kind of the philosophical world of things, but came out for those reasons. That was 28 years ago. Haven't left, and hop, skipped, and jumped around from engineering school to then to Naropa. The Buddhist contemplative school here in town. Got my degrees in music and yoga. So kind of hard left turn into the contemplative. Applied psychology world, but I was performing music, doing digital signal processing. So my engineering was still there, but it was just more entertainment focused.
Were you playing music?
Yeah, so I was, programming computers, performing, in kind of like a performance art. I was like I called my degree performance technology, composition performance with new technologies. And so I got to work with dancers and visual spaces and just kind of like real chaotic. And I had my mentors at CU, that were still teaching me on the new technology elements. But Naropa let me kind of really lose my mind on stage and do it that way. So it was kind of the educational platform I had always been looking for, because while the CU engineering school, was very competitive and very just kind of like almost, adversarial, where Naropa, people wanted to be there and it was about being present and people wanted to engage. And so I really thrived in that environment. And then from there, met the Ken Wilber community of, Integral Institute, and wore just about every operational hat in that organization. Started as a kind of a nonprofit think tank, and I came on as the IT manager, was my tech background. Then we spun off the global media company Integral Life, and I, ran marketing and, community engagement and various other things as kind of a key stakeholder of that organization. And then eventually I spun off my leadership development training company called the Integral Center. That was around 2011. And, and that I was the lead there as a CEO, and we, had the local 14,000 square foot facility with, it was a great place to throw some cool parties in Boulder. But we also had a really robust training company that attracted an international audience. And we also had, 5 profit centers. We had different communities and online products and various things kind of with that international audience. And so that's where I, was already had businesses up to that point, but got to cut my teeth as a leader and kind of earn my tiger stripes there for a decade, and then diffused the bomb on that one before we turned too much into a cult. And fortunately, right before the pandemic, so wasn't running a community center when the lockdown started, and was pretty pleased with myself about that. And then became an executive coach and started working with fast growth venture backed founders in the firm that I'm still a member of, still a partner of today, Newberg Gore. And so that's kind of a general landscape.
Hey, I just wanted to jump in here and give a quick shout out to the sponsor of today's podcast, B Micro, the easiest way to sneak vegetables into any meal. Due to soil depletion, GMOs, and monocropping, Americans are not getting enough nutrients. So in 2018, I founded B Micro, the first freeze-dried microgreens company in the US to help Americans get more concentrated natural nutrients into their diet. Microgreens are a phase in the plant's life when they're 14 days old and naturally the most concentrated in vitamins, minerals, nutrients, all the good things that we need. Our microgreens are grown here in the US in soil and a greenhouse. They're certified USDA organic and regenerative organic. We grow, wash, and freeze dry them to extend their 1 week shelf life to over 1 year, allowing us to ship anywhere in the US without the worry of spoilage. We have 2 flavors, broccoli, backed by over 2,000 studies on sulforaphane and its powerful detox benefits, and a blend of red cabbage, radish, and broccoli, the most potent detox formula we've tested, offering you the most bang for your buck. Easily sneak these microgreens in any meal. Eggs, smoothies, pizza, pasta, even your kids' mac and cheese, you can't even taste it. Use code STEVE15 to save at bmicro.farm.
So going back to when you were a kid and people were praising you on how smart you were, how did you view your abilities, superpowers then? Like, who did you know yourself as then?
It's a great question. And it's like, how does anyone kind of get trustworthy feedback on these things? I knew that I was able to get the adults' attention in a certain way, by being me. But I think it was how I talked and the concepts that I, understood and, picked up things like science, technology, math really quick. Had a good recall, but I was also kind of a performer. I could get attention, fairly well. So, it's interesting when you're a kid, or I guess any kind of creature, wherever there are rewards, you will optimize for that. So I knew how to kind of optimize to get the kind of attention that I needed, get people to tell me that I was smart. But, when it became time for like high school and it's just like, kind of relationships are you having? What kind of achievement are you having academically or athletically? That's where it's like, okay, I wasn't getting the kind of feedback that I wanted. It's like, oh, how come, I'm not able to, kind of have the relationships I think that I want to have? Or why is this not lining up in the way that it's supposed to line up for me? There were some things that just weren't adding up there. And that's where the inquiry, had to go deeper and I had to go further out.
And what was your relationship with nature like as a kid?
It's a good question. Like being someone raised in these generations where the internet was first coming online, like I was a computer kid, so I was in front of a screen early on. I'm still surprised there aren't like screen addiction counseling groups, because as far as addictions goes, it's pretty insidious. But yeah, I mean, TV, movies, the computer, all of those things. This was pre-smartphone, I was glued to that stuff. So when, my mom's side was, my mom grew up in Mississippi and, we would go there and my cousins would take my brother hunting and stuff. And, I was like, no, I'd rather stay inside and do that. So it's interesting. I didn't really see myself as a nature person. But then when my high school had like experiential education offerings, where we would go camping and rock climbing and things like that, that was actually my thing in high school, where we would actually have experiences that were risk-oriented and non-compartmentalizing, that I thrived there more than the sports and the academics and the other ways that were more traditional, these experiential areas. And that's actually kind of what drew me to Boulder. My mentor in high school went to CU Boulder, and that's where he had learned, those orientations.
Do you do any of those activities today? Do you try to, what's that look like?
For sure. I mean, I've always been a camping guy and backpacking or bagging 14ers, here in Colorado. It's interesting. I was a rock climber in high school. Loved that. And also caving was like my thing. Like going into the depths was, I used to guide caving trips and I loved it. But then you move out to a place like Boulder, Colorado, where you're basically like standing in line to go rock climbing. It kind of like the excitement of it wore off for me a little bit because it was such a thing here, that I was like, I don't know, maybe I needed to be different, but or maybe I'm just a dilettante, I'm a 7 on the Enneagram. Like, I'm always attracted by
Oh,
new
me too.
things. Nice. Yeah. So yeah, some is good, more is better, most is best, right?
Just
And
fun. I just want to have fun.
yeah, exactly. So, my rock, like I still love rock climbing, but I didn't, stick with it, as a lot of my friends did. But, the camping, the hiking, all that stuff, that's kind of like the water we swim in here in Colorado. And so I don't get to do it as much these days. I sleep in a tent, a good 12 to 18 weeks a year,
Really?
but not for just because we're going camping on the weekend.
Where are you doing that
for
at?
different reasons. Yeah, I go to Colombia or Maui into one jungle or the other. But these are like work camps. So kind of working on the land, either like kind of like agriculturally, farming wise, or just like it's like community infrastructure building or so supporting community projects like that.
And what's your connection down into the community in Colombia?
Yeah. So varied. I met my mentor 15 years ago, who's Colombian but lives in the States now. And he would bring us down there. We would either have retreats, plant medicine retreats, or during the summer, there was a family camp that was actually more for the local community in Colombia, to participate in Native American, indigenous practices from North America. So in the same way, that he was bringing out the South American indigenous traditions, we were bringing down the North American traditions for them as well. So we have a big summer camp, and there's a Sundance and other ancestral traditions like that in the summer. I actually just got back from that last week.
Oh, okay, great. I was just at a Sundance last week that was here in the past 20 years. It's been in, just as a guess, it's been in Boulder, but now it was in Brighton.
Is that Lee Plenty Wolves?
Yes.
Yeah. Great. How was it?
It was beautiful. I was there for the second day and did a community sweat. And one of my best friends, he was the one that led that sweat. And it was he's from Colombia, Andres Zambrano.
I haven't met him, but I've heard of him.
Meet him soon because he's about to move back to Colombia, to the jungle in like 3 weeks.
Yeah, Jackson was telling me a little bit about that.
And just by good luck, we've been housemates for the past 2 years. We moved into that house at like the same week. Yeah. So you still connected with Jackson?
Yeah. I mean, we were dancing with each other last week.
Oh,
in
nice.
Colombia.
Oh, good. He's someone that I would love to have on here as well. Maybe you can help give him a little
Happy
nudge.
to. Yeah. I'll say good things.
Oh, nice. Okay. So you were, explain to people that aren't familiar with what Sundance is.
Yeah. I mean, it's somewhat comical to try to articulate something that experiential in this kind of a modality, right? But hey, that's who we are in this generation, and in a sense, it's somewhat emblematic of the challenges of my unique journey of being someone who my comfort zone is making sense of complicated things and being smart enough to put words to it. And I have committed myself to a path of that is very not about mental understanding of things. That is much more about full-bodied experience and recognition of things without needing to put a symbolic association with it. So nevertheless, here we are asking a question so we can get just down to like basic brass tacks, right? This is a traditional ceremony from the Lakota people, the North American, indigenous tribes, and what would likely be considered probably their most important annual ceremony. And it's a big ceremony. It takes a lot of people, a lot of work to get it off the ground. There's a lot of moving parts, and that goes into the power that's experienced at a Sundance. But it's an annual prayer of renewal for the community. It is a prayer for the continuation of life. And there are many elements that go into embodying that and making it so meaningful for the people.
What did it feel like this year for you?
Beautiful. I mean, participating, supporting the prayer like you did this year. And, I've done that for many years before I started supporting it more close, more close in the arbor. Every year it makes a little more sense, if it ever makes sense, but the relationship gets deeper. And my relationship with the people. So this year was unique for me in that this was my 5th year dancing in Colombia. So I completed my first 4-year cycle, as they say. And so it's traditional to offer a wopila, which is a give back to the community for supporting me in the efforts over the years. So I hosted a feast. I got to bring some gifts and infrastructure for the camp and really get to celebrate, completed one lap around. So I was, primarily kind of basking in that experience of really feeling all the benefit that I had received by being a part of this really dear community to me, putting that to words and sharing back with them. And so I was very much in a giving position, and that made the dance really beautiful for me.
Now, is there an aspect to the dance where you're without food and drink?
Yeah, that's traditionally, there's lots of variations, but this is the way I know, but the traditional way to participate and get the benefits of it is to fast. So no food, no water for the 4 days of the dance.
And then you're doing a sweat at the beginning of each day and the end of each day?
Yeah, before the sun comes up, every morning, and then after the sun goes down every evening.
So for me, I would think, I'm like, okay, if I were to do that, that sounds like the hardest part, being without water and then maybe without food and then just maybe not as, what's the hardest part for maybe somebody in their first year versus what's the hardest part when you're in your 5th year?
Yeah. I just have to zoom out for a second and just kind of acknowledge the comical nature of talking about the Sundance ceremony in a podcast as a white guy, like this traditional Native American sacred thing that I'm blessed to even have the opportunity to be around.
Same.
Now I'm being asked to characterize it. So I just want to acknowledge that I'm merely a participant in this world, learning with as much humility as I can demonstrate.
Of course.
I would say my ancestry lends me to be more arrogant about these things than normal. So please forgive me for the ways that I am conveying these things, and please take everything I have with a nice big white grain of salt.
Thank you. You're forgiven. I hope you can forgive yourself too.
Yeah, well, that may be the hardest part.
For
Aaron.
sure. It's hard.
That might be the answer to your question is allowing myself to just be me and forgive myself. But yeah, I'd say the hardest part is being present. We live in a world of distractions, of really effective distractions. And the market thrives on its ability to distract, right? We've got these great AI technologies that are coming up that are just brilliant at giving me a massive dopamine hit by hitting the magic button that then the sycophantic bot comes and tells me how wise and smart I am to even ask such a question, And so, of course, these businesses are blowing up right now because they're really effective at getting our attention. And, try to crowbar a smartphone out of anyone's hands these days, and you'll meet the real person beneath them. So this is why I love to go to these places. This is why I spend, 12 plus weeks in a tent a year, is because most of these places don't have cell phone service, with Starlink. That's probably nearing the end of that world too. But to be able to be in a place where I don't have a cell phone in my pocket for over a week is pretty glorious. And I'm a person that already is sold on digital detox and the importance of that and the value of it. And it's hard for me to get away. There's parts I want to hike up the hill and I need to check in with my clients. I need to do all the things. But the way these containers are set up is it's really hard. And so it's incredibly beneficial to get that digital detox. And it is rare and is probably going to continue to be harder. So the difficult thing of that, and then even once you let go of the smartphone, there's, well, I want to talk to my friend about this thing. We're fasting. I want to talk about food. My stomach's growling. What restaurant are we going to go to when we get out of here if we survive, And all of the things in my life that aren't the most important thing is, in a way, I assume, how my mind is kind of trained, how it's entrained, right? And so choosing to let go of that and just focus on this very simple thing, this prayer for life, which is the sun dance, is that's the meditation practice. It's coming back to center, letting go of these distractions and coming back.
Is there a practice that you teach, being kind of like a leader of leaders, helping startup CEOs and founders and investors? And is there a practice that maybe you'll bring into a meeting or or like a working session or something like that to help bring people in from like out of their heads and into maybe their heart and into their body?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, it's like over the years, it's like there are great mindfulness practices, secular mindfulness practices and injunctions and ways to come into the present moment. And I think, the breath practices are probably the best low-hanging fruit to offer people. I love working with leaders who don't have an orientation to personal development and wellness and psychology and that whole world. In a way, I think those are the ones may need it the most, but they're the ones who I love meeting the most because, I can speak their language and I like being able to bring them things that work. And so in a sense, I can't just use a platitude of like, oh, meditation has all these benefits. I need to kind of put up or shut up, right? And I think breathwork practices are some of the most kind of phenomenologically engaging ways to have an experience out of the gate. You can teach someone the 3-part breath, right? An inhale and an extended exhale, and feel that shift when the body kicks into the parasympathetic nervous system, the psychological sigh, physiological sigh. You can demonstrate that pretty quickly. And so that's a good one to teach. But at the end of the day, it's like, while I would love to have my clients doing mindfulness practices and breathing practices, and that's the best way to get on top of burnout and stress, it's hard. It's hard in my own life to keep those things. So in a sense, I find the, present moment practices in a relational orientation are a little more consistent and reliable. And what I mean by that is just like acknowledging things that are happening in the moment. So like a few minutes ago in this conversation, we spoke to the comic nature of trying to articulate such complicated ideas or such non-mental ideas in a mental environment. So like that's a moment of just kind of like in the moment, like, okay, this is what's happening in this relational space. And to me, that is an experience of present moment mindfulness that's in a way more pragmatic than, okay, we're going to just focus on our breath for a minute, right? Because we're always in a relational space, even if other people aren't around. So learning to kind of go meta on things, acknowledge what's happening, and then acknowledge what it's like to acknowledge that is because that was what we were teaching at the Integral Center, the circling practices, the authentic relating practices, kind of give it a name, was a very engaging, direct way to have the felt experience of present moment without needing to get into too much fancy technologies.
And what does self-care look like for you today?
You're good at these tangents.
I'm just good at tuning to you.
Fair enough.
We're both 7, so I think there's an extra goodness there.
As a 7, my self-care practices change a lot, So I kind of go around and around the block in many ways. So I'm
Same.
always, whether it's upgrading my diet or whether it's upgrading my physical routines, or, it's like my favorite self-care psychotechnology is, hot cold therapy, right? Sauna, cold plunge, maybe a real hot sauna, 220 degrees with a real cold it's I think for any startup leader or someone who's facing a lot of stress, that's the best way to take care of the physiology. I mean, it's really direct. You get into that cold plunge, your sympathetic nervous system gives up. There's not many more just kind of direct ways to give the fight a way to give up. Now, I could go through the whole list of the things that have really moved the needle for me in self-care. There's these physical practices talking about diet and exercise, sleep, right? Then there's like the physical environment. So like cleaning out my space. Like I like to be a very tidy person. If we're using made up assessments like the Enneagram, we can do it in astrology too. I'm a Virgo. I like very orderly space, But making a list of all the things in my house, I was just telling you earlier how I just moved 2 years ago and still unpacking the boxes. But like, making a list of all the things that need to kind of be taken care of that way, man, that has amazing self-care psychological benefits. Like you want a clear head, have a clear space. That's why they say it's like, if you want to change the world, make your bed first. Before you tell anybody that they need to do something different with their life, look in your refrigerator, look in your bedroom, start there. So those things are the most important. And then once you get that figured out, then we can look at your finances and your relationships and your sense of purpose and contribution and all of those things. And then you can ask ChatGPT what it thinks about all of it, and it'll tell you how brilliant you are for even asking the question. But for me today, since you're asking the question today, I'm much into how do I love the people closest to me. I've been a nice guy my whole life. I'm, civilized. I can, create rapport and people trust me. I think that's why I'm able to work with some of the people that I work with. But when it comes to the people like I live with, my family, how do I love them? Can I actually share what matters to me in a way that isn't about me getting validation, or all those things? That's the hardest thing that I'm working with in my life right now, and also has the highest ROI for my physiology, my psychology, all the things that matter.
And what are some of those practices around that giving, receiving love with those you care about most?
Yeah, it's once again profoundly simple. It's like, can I tell my partner how I'm grateful for her? If I were listening to myself talk right now, it's like, well, yeah, duh, great, appreciation, gratefulness. It's pretty easy. You just say it. Tell me that when you're sitting in front of her, and you're mad.
Yeah.
I'm even saying you. It's like, it's like when I'm in the situations of like, life is complex, stressful. We have big decisions to make. There's all these things all around us swirling around. Can I actually say what I feel and feel it while I say it? I mean, I've been leading authentic relating kind of like workshops for almost 20 years, right? In a workshop setting, it's much easier. It's much more set up for success. The risks are lower, all of those things. But in the place where it really matters with the person that you have to live with on a day-to-day basis. So what is the practice? Showing up and doing it, getting some reps, proving to yourself, proving to myself, proving to him, to her that it's there. Pretty simple stuff, not a lot of profundity here.
Yeah, I find with my girlfriend, when we have a rupture, we do couples counseling,
Mhm.
and we have learned how to repair. And like instantly there's a rupture, whatever it is. For me, my biggest thing, like I get triggered in my kitchen. And so that's like she knows to, and so she has a word for me. Hey, you're getting stern. Or if I'm looking at her in a certain way because she reminds me of an ex that it did not work out. I'm like, wait, are you her? She's like, oh, here's the detective. The detective's here, in like a
Nice.
fun, loving way, like
Yeah.
naming it. And then I'll say to her, or whoever's the most resource, will start the repair, and I'll say, I love you. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. And then also that you're safe. That's what she likes me to say. And then she says pretty much the same thing back to me. And then it's like, okay, we're good. This is whatever is happening here is not bigger than us, and that our trust in each other deepened significantly the more ruptures and repairs we have. So it's like, hey, that rupture is actually like a great gift,
Totally.
and please hold space for me while this wound feels safe enough to come up to the surface to be looked at and healed. And I'll try to just grab onto that golden thread of, when it maybe where it came from, where that first let's see, I just moved that out of the shot, where that first moment came from. So yeah, it can be very hard in the moment. And many
Yeah.
times I'll ask her. Many times I can't even tell her that I love her, and that she's safe and all that. I need her to say it to me first, because my bandwidth is like this.
So do you actually ask her to do that?
Mhm.
Nice.
Yeah, I'll ask her. I was like, can you start the repair? Because I'm losing it.
Yeah, whoever has less in the gas tank, needs to start. And
Mhm.
no, that's great. I love the kind of the noting and labeling, right? Like you've got the names for the parts that come out, and so
Mhm.
you build that rapport, and then there's precedent that the repair can happen. What I found is, when you do couples counseling, we do it as well. You do relationship workshops, you learn a new framework, something like that. There's like the instant expert comes online, and all of a sudden I'm applying it in all my relationships and getting lots of mileage until the next level comes up. And then we're just a novice. I've known in a couple of my closest relationships, we had to stop the relationship practice stuff, the processing, because there's a way that it can become addictive as well, of just like, okay, anything comes up, oh, we need to dive in, we need to open this up and unpack it and analyze it. And it's just like, oh my God, can we not just live our lives?
Yeah.
And so, I've gone through that experience. There's like no more processing.
Yeah.
Let's just be human beings. So I'm like, oh, thank God, now we're just living life. And then after that, we had to relearn how to do relationship practice. So in a way, it's like, couldn't just use the old repair tricks. We had to learn the new orientation that's unique to the unique set of problems and conflicts we're doing today. So I love the continuous journey of these things.
What would you say? I grew up in a way where I do individual therapy weekly now for years. And I grew up in a way where the people that go, I'm from Chicago, and if you go to therapy, it's because, I don't know, you're broken and bad, and
An incident happened.
Yeah.
Something happened, so now he's in therapy. Same. That's how it was where I came from.
And for couples counseling, it's like, that's just for people that are about to get a divorce.
Yep.
Where in indigenous culture, my understanding is many people will start couples counseling immediately upon kind of connecting. And I think of it like, oh, if I want to get good at pickleball, I'm going to go get a coach right away. Why not get a coach for the most important and at times challenging relationship and thing in your life?
I love it. I love that orientation. It's the same way, like if you're going to learn a musical instrument, sure, you could self-teach, but taking some lessons from someone that knows how to do it, you get a higher ROI.
Yep.
And I like the athletics. Yeah, it's a studying it, taking it seriously, investing in it, you get better benefits. And I think it's true. It's my girlfriend's mom is a minister. She marries people. And part of that process involves her counseling the couples, through that process. And I think that's a wise move, right? Is that becoming better at your relationship. I think it's important to always recognize the benefits of things, but also the liabilities, because if, yeah, you've been in the therapeutic world long enough, the downsides. I mean, I'll speak for myself of like where there can kind of be an auto analyzer that goes on, with other people. It's like
Mm,
therapy communities where it's just like it's always, like I was describing before, always processing, always needing to kind of nitpick and unpack. And it's just like, leave people alone. Or it's even more insidious, like introsubjectively, where it's just like there's a part of me that's just always on autopilot, analyzing every thought that comes up, And that's when I've had to like take breaks and not have a therapist for some years and not do facilitative kind of modalities to just kind of like, okay, just allow things. And then once again, go back and forth.
Do you think a therapist could transform into a teacher or a mentor or
Generally,
just generally? Because that's what's happening to me with my therapist. I was going for therapy, was going through something really challenging, and then it's transformed much more into a mentor, teacher, like it's
I think so.
life coach-ish.
I mean, classical clinical therapy, has these kinds of boundaries, right? It's like, okay, you're not friends with your therapist. In traditional clinical modalities, the therapist doesn't talk about their own life, like they don't have an experience. And there's good reasons for that. And it's good to know about those reasons. But the more psychodynamic modalities now are much more oriented to, well, let me tell you about a time in my life or this. And that actually can create more rapport and it can actually move things along. And, having dual relationships, being a friend and a therapist, it, I think, raises the bar for the expertise around the boundaries, knowing when you're sailing into potentially contentious waters, conflicts of interest. I've known very messy people, that are professionals and aren't good at those boundaries. So it's good to be aware of the risks there. But I think people are definitely capable of it. And in a sense, the challenges that we're facing these days, this kind of flexibility and adaptability is, call it, even necessary. Now, for me, it's like I have a men's group that I've had for 17 years now, same group of guys that we meet every 2 weeks and are supporting each other in this explicit container, right? And I always felt like that's a really great, call it an alternative, call it a next step, when maybe you've done some deep work with your therapist and you want to have a support container that you're not paying for, but it's co-supportive, having friendships that are oriented in that way, that you have those technologies, but a group like that, it's really great. And then of course you do encounter the ways in which like, oh, how am I your friend, but how do I also be supportive of you? And in a way where we're not making it more difficult to be friends or a support structure. Several of people in my men's group, I coach on their businesses, to add another layer of that. And it's it requires some more nuance there. But 100%, I think the adaptability of roles is somewhat necessary these days.
What does that look like when you're coaching somebody? Somebody is just starting with you. They're like, hey, maybe they're hearing this right now. They're like, oh, I could use a coach on my business. What kind of maybe intake or structure, framework, support does that look like that you offer?
Great. So obviously it depends on the context of what they're going through. It'll be different for someone who's like transitioning from one career to a next, or, has things personally in their life. But generally, and this is what I'm most commonly working with, are leaders that are on a team. I like to work with fast growth leaders that have like just gotten like a big influx of capital, like an investment round, and now they have to scale up their company and encounter a whole bunch of dimensions that scares the crap out of them, right? And so the way that I like to get as much surface area as possible, like with a kickoff assessment, is we have a 360 that we deploy, with an instrument that, involves surveys to key stakeholders. But I also do interview-based 360. So it's just like, okay, put me on the phone with the key people in your life. So if it's a CEO of a venture-backed company, I want to talk to your co-founder. I want to talk to board members, the people that have invested in you. I want to talk to your your partner, your wife, or, husband, or whoever that is that's got different intel on you. And then I want to get data from the direct reports. I'll do observation meetings. So I'll sit in, on their leadership team meeting or their board meeting, and I want to see the dynamics that are going on there. And I also do like a dashboard review. So I want to actually see how you relate to the business model. How do you measure success? What is your business model? What's your business plan? Show me your P&L. Like, I want to see how that's going, because all of those things are going to tell me how you orient to the business and where we're going to get, the most ground in the coaching. I'll speak to my clients' therapists. I'll create a therapeutic alliance there so that we know we're working in alignment with each other in those ways. So I try to do as much of that as possible on the front end with a kickoff, and then from there, the coaching is still a one-on-one relationship, and we might do trainings with teams or things like that ad hoc going on. But that's how I like to kick it off.
What does burnout look like within these founders and teams?
Insidious, celebrated.
Celebrated. Wow.
Well, there's the whole mentality in the startup community that, like, yeah, if you're not sleeping under your desk, you're not doing it right. And in a way, it's easy for me as a consultant to say, it's like, well, that's suboptimal. That there are more optimal ways to engage. That in a way, I would like to say that quality is more important than quantity, but the truth of the matter, it is both, and there's definitely a time when you need to work 7 days a week. Ideally, that doesn't go on for years. There's some startup communities that, like to say it's just you need to hustle all the time. And the business isn't dead until you give up. It's kind of puts all the responsibility on the founder, where I think, my mentors have taught me that if the business model thesis isn't valid, if you've tested that thesis and it's not working out, you kill the business and move on to doing something more productive with your time. And so in a sense, I want to support people. I've coached a lot of people out of the businesses that they are in because it was not sustainable for what they were doing. And so I think this is a really important question today as leaders try to determine for themselves what is optimal performance for themselves and how they model that for their team. Because a lot of leaders are pushed, and I've talked to VCs and investors that say, like, yeah, so this founder, they're responding to me within a day. I need them to be responding to me within an hour. And they'll even say, it's like, it's not so much that I expect them always to be working, but it needs to look like they're always working. Like, that's the mentality in these ecosystems. And so it's understandable. And there's all this pressure from the top. Of course, the leader doesn't see the outsized impact they have when they criticize people, that report to them, that they are able to fire and write their paychecks and everything. And so, they send a Slack message to one of their workers on a Saturday, then the worker's going to say, it's like, well, I'm expected to work on the weekends. And so these burnout cultures are insidious. But with a real proper analysis of, like, actually, it's like, I like the metaphor of, with your phone or anything that has a battery, you don't want to drain it all the way down to zero. Once it gets down to 15 to 20%, that's when you want to charge it back up. And I think that's apt for ourselves, that we need to really know what our renewal practices, self-care practices are. Like, if it's sauna and cold plunge that works for me, then I need to make sure I'm getting to that sauna before I get below 15% of my energy. That once I'm on the floor, that's going to have negative consequences for the projects that I care about, for everyone around me. It's going to push me back. It's going to regress as opposed to moving things forward. And just one more thing, the last thing I'll say about this is it's unique to every person, right? And I think it's essential for any leader today to understand, obviously, their strengths and weaknesses, but how it shows up in these ways. Like, when you're stressed, what do? Do you work harder? That's a lot of people I work with, that's all they know. If things are looking dire, well, that just means I need to lean in more. Well, that's means that that's probably also having negative consequences as well because it's stress oriented. So knowing how to construct your own relationship to burnout, the user manual for your burnout, how to get yourself out of it and how to coach the people around you to recognize the signals and how to intervene with you effectively.
And when somebody does experience burnout, then what happens? How long does burnout last? What happens to their energy? Can they come back? I've known people that seem like it's taken years for them to come back from burnout. And maybe they were operating in burnout for a long time and that made it just much worse. But it seems like if you hit burnout, it's you're like out of the game.
Yeah, I think it's like a lot of illnesses. Someone can get, mold exposure and they don't know that they're allergic to mold for years until all of a sudden their functioning has reached such a deteriorated level that they have to recognize where it's coming from and they get out of that house. And then it takes years for them to recover. And like many, many illnesses like that, it's the same thing of the longer you're exposed to it, the more that it takes recovery. Now, in the cases of burnout, there can be great silver linings there of what you learned. And then, of course, the next career that you step into and like what you're given money to go forward is more successful based on what you've learned. But I think those costs can be limited. They're not necessary to go that deep into it. So, what does it look like? Well, when things start falling apart all around you, your relationships, and when you start ignoring the signals around that, that's when it's happening. And that's when finding a way to get out of Dodge, to recover. And I think this is one of the things. It's like when I'm recognizing stress and burnout in the people that I work with, so like, when was the last time you took a vacation? Well, first we have to define like, what does a vacation even look like, right? We've already said it's impossible to get a smartphone out of people's hands, but like, do you actually know how to effectively vacation, right? Do you have KPIs for your recreation? Because recreation, recreate, it's about getting far enough away from the ego project that you can reset. And that's where the creativity comes back in. All of a sudden, I'm getting downloads because I'm an open vessel for what matters. Then I'm inspired, then I'm leaning in, then I want to go back, as opposed to, alcohol, screens, whatever the ways. If that's just escapism and numbing out the pain and not getting to the bottom, that's not going to recreate anything.
How important is creativity in leadership?
Well, essential is the easy answer. I mean, obviously there are creative roles that that, by definition require more creativity, and there's like more left brain oriented, for a tech company, usually those are started by an engineer who understands how to take an algorithmic solution and build that out, right? It's kind of like builder mentality. But that's still very creative, right? And so creativity, of course, I think is anything. It almost begs the question, like, what isn't creativity? And in a sense, I guess, if I just need a job and I go get hired into a role and really all I need to do is show up and turn on some form of autopilot, and there's a paycheck there, there's benefits, that's great. That's fine. I think creativity is a little more necessary when we go into more uncertain circumstances, and leadership is rife with that.
What would you say the common themes of motivation are across some of the founders that have been successful that you work with?
Yeah, I think, we live within layers of nested contexts. And in a sense, it's easy to set our clocks by the expectations around us, right? So if I'm an executive in an organization, it's like there's what the CEO is telling me, there's what my coworkers are telling me, and it's easy to kind of devolve in a way into being motivated by what's just going to kind of give them what they need. Being able to transcend what other people think I need to be doing is I think, what allows the motivation to create the things that they actually want. So one of the challenges in kind of the VC backed community is the investors think they know how to run your business. I mean, it's easy to make generalizations. There's better investors, there's worse investors, but it's a common trope, where it's like the investors are holding you accountable. That's how the power hierarchy works. It's their job to make sure the right CEO is in that seat. They have hiring and firing power over you as the leader. And so when they say like, hey, you need to clean up the P&L this way, your comps need to look better against the other businesses in your space, the product should probably look like this, you need to get rid of these features. Well, that's someone in a way that's holding an existential threat over you and telling you what to do. You certainly don't want to ignore that. But I think the leaders that certainly are able to transcend beyond that pressure and see something that is more creative, that then have the motivation, the energy to bring novelty in, and that makes exciting things happen. So I know I'm being very abstract there, but feel free to follow
Well, I wonder,
up on that.
as a founder, like for me, passion has always driven. I'm like, I'm inspired by this. I'm passionate about this. I'm just going to keep going. Sometimes to my own fault. Sometimes I stay in things way too long. And I'm like, also in the curiosity and wondering, like, when do I let something go? Because I'll pray with my businesses now, this podcast and Be Micro, and I'm like, what do you need? Like, it's a soul, like it's a living thing, because I've been able to communicate with it in that way.
Right.
What do you need? What what's that? Where are you at? Like, how are you doing? How can I support you? Those types of things, and I don't know if it's my ego or if I am in communication with it. It certainly feels like I'm in communication with it when I'm in a very prayerful way with it. Specifically, Be Micro is a little bit more of a challenging communication right now than Plant Frequencies. Is just like buzzing. This is like buzzing. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I think you just described it, and you were telling me earlier how just with these conversations, you've been getting just much more engagement, that you've been accelerating much more. You use the word buzz. It's buzzing.
And there's so much creativity. I get to be so creative, and the kind of partners that I'm partnering with on it, they're all creatives too, because there's like a whole art form around this, and just the edit alone. So there's just so much creativity, and that creativity I think is so important to have a constant flow of creativity, and the creativity sometimes gets choked at Be Micro, where sometimes I'm like, what have I built myself? Like this kind of like some kind, but I'm also learning. I'm like, okay, that's my first business. I'm learning how to do business. I'm building the relationships. I'm understanding what the tech stack looks like, and what's most important, what's my role. There's so many learnings, and it feels like my kind of like training wheels business in a way. But then there's also times where I just kind of put it on autopilot, or I'm just like, I let somebody else kind of just handle the day to day of it, and I start to remove myself from it because the momentum, is just not there.
Yeah, I want to share an analogy that a mentor of mine shared with me recently, and that is, comparing intrinsic motivation to more kind of an extrinsic or more kind of costly motivation. And this is the sailboat versus the motorboat. And, first I'll say, it's like, just take the example. Let's say, you're at a picnic, you've got a big plate of food, overflowing, more food than you know what to deal with. And there's someone next to you who's very hungry that doesn't have any food. Well, it's not because, you're just such a nice person or whatever, but you just give them more food. You give them some of your food to share because you got plenty of it. That's called surplus-based motivation. And so, to the analogy, it's like, a motorboat is, it's powerful, right? It can go in any direction. It can go really fast, but it requires gasoline or some sort of resource to make it go. It can also be choppy, the experience of being on a motorboat. Like if you're just going like in any direction over some waves, there's chatter, there's wind, it's kind of hard to hear each other talk or anything like that. It's kind of teeth chattering. And maybe that's exciting. And then you can definitely get some places with a motorboat. But then you compare that to a sailboat. And now a sailboat, you can't go in any direction. But if the winds favor, it can take you all the way around the world without any needed resources. No gas, no electricity or anything. And these really fancy sailboats, kind of like, the hydroplane, like you can be going downwind 50 miles per hour and it would sound like us having a conversation like this, completely calm, completely still, but just taking care of business. So that's what surplus-based motivation can feel like. I've got this extra food. I'm just going to give it to this person. I've got winds pushing me along here. It's easy. I'm just gonna share it. And so I think most leaders and people that work in the world are more kind of in this motorboat mentality of like, oh, I can make it happen. Like, I know where the investors are. I know where the engineers are. I can push this product to market. But in a way, they don't know how to get out of that. That's the only thing they know that works. They don't know that it can actually be easier. But I've seen leaders transition from one to the other, and it can take a few years of recognizing where I'm addicted to just kind of forcing it through to tuning in to where I have additional surplus gifts to offer and where there's people that are just interested in it. And all I have to do is show up for that. And you can build quite a successful career that way.
Yeah, that sounds great. That's what this podcast is feeling more like, and Be Micro is feeling more like it's a motorboat. I've thrown so much gasoline and resource at it, and I'm like,
Does it need to be this hard?
Yeah, does it need to be this hard? What is this? Is it also my own mindset? There's a mindset in me of like a sacrificial lamb too, growing up also in the Christian culture, and going to a Christian college, and and Jesus is still part of my management team. And when I pray, Jesus is part of who I pray to. I think
Nice.
I'm Team Jesus. That's great. But there's a major sacrificial lamb component to that religion, and that's in me where I'm like, oh, I have to give 10 to get 1. And it doesn't just show up in business. I'm aware of it and I'm working on it. And it also gives like kind of like a poor man's like mentality around it too. There's almost like a scarcity mindset too. So I'm in the in between of awareness and shifting to more of this finding the wins and just showing up and just following inspiration and trust.
I love this conversation, and I like how you're not throwing the Christ baby out with the bathwater, right? It's transcend and include. But yeah, the Christo mythology has a lot of like heroic leadership baked into it, that this guy had to get up on the cross and die for all of our sins. And now that was a really important technology for the species to have that embodiment of spirituality as a person and all of those things. But we have to be careful where that gets into our psyche, that we see the problems happening in the world and the poly crisis and think that's like, well, this is what I was born for. It's time for me to face the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune and take one for the team. And maybe, or maybe clean up your room and, be part of the solution and pray about it a little bit. And maybe that fight can kind of settle down, that I don't have to go start wars in other countries.
What does prayer look like for you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I wouldn't say I know. In many ways, I've committed my life to prayer, but it's like many other things. I feel like I know less about it, as I go along, because growing up, it's like, you say your prayers before you go to bed. It's like, well, God bless these people in my life. And I think that kind of narrative form of prayer is really beautiful. And I still enjoy doing that. Of like, I'm a mentally oriented person. I like bringing things into words, but in a way, prayer can just be full-bodied, present engagement, and that as I think most people can relate to, music can be prayer if it's something that you deeply care about that represents your highest values and you're putting all of your heart and soul into it. Um, for me, it's like, if I know I need to pray about something like you were just talking about, you pray about your business, you pray about the work that you're doing. It's a meditation practice, bringing all of our attention to it. And not while I'm driving the car, on the way to the airport or something like that, but actually like sacrificing other things I could be doing with my time to put orientation onto it, to really devoting myself. That, I think devotion is an essential part of where I get the benefits of prayer. Of commitment. I was thinking about this earlier in a conversation, but have you ever read David Foster Wallace? Any of his stuff? He wrote Infinite Jest. He was kind of one of the big meta-modern, postmodern writers, and brilliant, amazing novelist who was a college professor. And so he's got this very famous university commencement address that is on YouTube. I highly recommend it. I think it's like maybe 20 minutes long, but it's called This Is Water. And in it, he speaks to the importance of having something to worship. And it's like, sure, it can be worshiping a traditional religious narrative or orientation or practice, but it can also be kind of a, universal human rights, or just like having a values hierarchy is essential, because as he says it, like, if you don't, society will choose what you worship. And it's not going to be that great. It's going to be the billboards that are thrown up that are paying money to buy your attention. And in this postmodern world that we live in right now, where deconstruction is more of the practice than anything else, for all sorts of good reasons. There's been all sorts of challenging things. So things needed to be inspected and picked apart and pulled apart. Well, a lot of babies get thrown out with that bathwater. And the whole idea of one thing being more valuable than another is almost taboo. And so it's more important than ever for us to choose and create our own values hierarchies and have an altar in our psyche, in our life, that we can put what we value on it so that we can orient that way to be better people, because culture is doing it less and less for us.
This podcast is brought to you by B Micro, organic freeze-dried microgreens for easy, natural nutrition. Sprinkle them on any meal and enjoy the benefits. Shop now at bmicro.farm and use code STEVE15 to save.
Are there values that come to mind that you think maybe a top 3 that most people could benefit from if they haven't thought about their own values? Either they're a leader in their household or they're just a leader of themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where studying the religious traditions is super valuable, because this is kind of like, careful with this terminology, but it's like, you take the red pill and you kind of deconstruct the whole world. You see the matrix and everything is just constructs of constructs. It's just like, well, good. Now take the blue pill and recreate your constructs. But now you get to be holding the paintbrush and putting it back together. And so that's when looking at the religious traditions is much more insightful, or at least was for me. It's like, oh, this is the values hierarchy that Christianity or that Buddhism or that Taoism or that Islam, all these things are putting on the table. Wow, okay, this is really great. So in a sense, it's just kind of like, the virtues that, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path, are really great. Where it's like, if you kind of analyzed all the businesses in the world for like what were the values that they came together, probably one of the words that's definitely on that top 3 list is integrity. And I challenge anyone to say, it's like, well, what does that word actually mean? Well, for me, I have a very specific, definition for that, and it's doing what I say I'm going to do. And in a sense, that's right speech. Well, right speech also includes, not being violent with your language, but doing what I say I'm going to do is like being true to my word. If I say I'm going to, show up for this recording with you, or I'm going to follow up and introduce you to someone, or I'm going to do something, that I actually do it. And that's one where relationally it's very important in our relationships with others, but I think it's even more important in our relationship with ourselves. Right. And like, how often am I telling myself, it's like, okay, I'm going to get my life together in this way, or I'm going to finally talk to mom in this way, whatever it is. Well, how often are you actually following through on those things? And having integrity of yourself, I think, is probably one of the most noble values one can strive for.
Is there a number one spot that people fall out of integrity?
I mean, I think a friend of mine was pointing this out, that like if you actually tracked a person's conversations through, a whole day or week or a year, and saw how contradictory they are, and that usually the people aren't aware of it at all. Well, to be fair, it's like you do have to kind of contextually customize how you present yourself in one place or another, but more often than not, that's where people get caught in the traps, is that they're managing one relationship and optimizing what they're putting their integrity on the line for here, and then violating that in the next conversation, and usually having some selective amnesia around that.
I've taken some integrity training, and what I noticed in a group setting was the number one place that people were falling out of integrity was around their time, and saying that they would be somewhere at noon and then they'd be there at 1, 2, 3 minutes past that,
Yeah.
and letting it slip. So then just building a framework and a structure of like, okay, you've put it into your calendar that this is a thing, and then put like a 10-minute like alert before that, or something in that kind of a way. And then once you have that like kind of cornerstone, then integrity starts to kind of domino in a positive direction everywhere. But that was like, for 9 out of 10 people, that was the number one kind of domino to start with.
That's dynamite. And unfortunately, it's culturally dependent, because if you go to
yeah.
Switzerland, Germany, the train leaves at 4 p.m. when it's scheduled. You go to some other countries.
How about you go to a sweat lodge?
Oh, we're on spiritual time. This isn't Chronos. This is Kairos.
Which is great too,
Thanks,
which I'm into that.
There's an orientation that way too. But
Mhm.
this was one of the favorite things I loved about leading my trainings, is that was a number one commitment, integrity of doing what we said we would do, and showing up on time. Is like, no, when we say the class comes back at 1 p.m., we're going to start at 1 p.m. And we're going to have a conversation with anyone who isn't there at that time. Now, this isn't like Landmark, and we're going to kick you out of the course, but we're going to use
That
it as
is where I
as
got
an
my integrity
opportunity.
training from, was Landmark. That is so funny.
Well, they do have good trainings and good distinctions on
Yeah.
these things, but I agree. It's like you almost have to train people in your life this way. It's like, no, when I say I'm going to be there at 1 p.m., I'm going to be there at 1 p.m. and commit to that and hold myself accountable to it. Where I see this really unfold with leaders and their teams is letting people off the hook, So, you hire someone and they turn out to be not the best performer, and you're holding expectations for them to deliver on certain tasks, and they're not doing it. And you're like, well, okay, well, I'll give them another shot. I'm tired. I'm burned out. I don't have the energy to have a confrontational conversation. Well, the problem is the other people in the team see that, and you might have some A+ players who are delivering that way. And what happened for them? The bar just got lowered. Now they are actually prone to experiencing less of their own excellence by working for you. When what you need to do is move the underperformer out of your organization, which is arguably better for that person than presuming, oh, they're going to just get better here. But it's in the way, it's like the same thing if you're training a dog or raising kids. I mean, this goes into a lot of different, worldviews around these things. But if you're going to we've seen people that make threats that are just all bark and no bite. No, we're not saying to bite anybody, but it is to live in integrity, to say, it's like, okay, when we say we're going to do a thing, then we're going to either do that thing or renegotiate that commitment and maintain integrity. And that's a very high bar, but I think it's an achievable bar because a lot of people live their lives that way, and it makes the cultures around them inspiring and magnetizing. Because it's like, with the military, they say, be all that you can be. Well, imagine if your work team is a place where people come and become better people because of the values and the integrity and the discipline. And those are the places that I like to be.
Is there a common theme amongst those founders or those CEOs? Did they just grow up a certain way, like a lot of hardships, and that really forged some ability in them, or did they have incredible mentorship, or is there any common themes amongst the abilities of these just outstanding founders?
Yeah, well, I would say if we're talking about people that maintain high integrity, and then certainly they had that influence somewhere in their life. Whether they were raised in a military family, which has negative liabilities as well, but often when I'm working with a leader who is having trouble with underperformance on their team, and they don't want to be a jerk, they don't want to make someone feel bad by kind of like grilling them about underperformance. What I like to do is ask them, who were some of the people that you've had in mentorship roles in your life? Maybe they were a manager that managed you. Maybe they were a coach of your sports team or something like that. Maybe they were a parent. But think about who were some of the inspiring people in your life that helped you achieve more. And then, you get some engagement that way, and tell me about your coach on your sports team. It's like, well, how did they deal with a situation like this when someone wasn't trying that hard? How would they respond to it? What did you like about that? What did you not like about that? And that's a good way to kind of dig beneath the soil and find the roots of where these people learned about these things, but to refresh. Okay, yeah, I loved how they did it. I didn't like the way they did it like this. Okay, cool, great. Now you've clarified the way that you trust and how it got through to you and how you can bring it. So have the conversation with your employee that way.
Are there any leaders of past or present that inspire you today?
Definitely. I mean, it's like the mentors in my life I'm very inspired with in varying ways. And one in particular on this topic of like, of holding just a high bar for integrity of these ways. That's why I spend as much time, in those places with him. But, there's also, mentors and leaders that I train with that just have an understanding of their domains that are masterful and proficient, and I want to learn in those ways. So it's multidisciplinary, it's varied.
What do you think of some of these more ancestral teachings and how they'll be carried forward coming into this age of AI? Will they, what does your crystal ball say? With this world of AI and maybe some of these teachings that have been so foundational to you and to me, will they even be able to carry forward?
Well, I love that people are drawn to them. And I think it's certainly easy to have a kind of a modern technocratic worldview of just like, if you can't measure it, it doesn't exist, right? That will dismiss the traditions as irrelevant. I love that more and more people are interested in the traditions and looking back at, what's good, true, and beautiful from our ancestors, and particularly from the more native ancestors, that there is an attraction. I think in some ways there's a retro romanticism of assuming that they were perfect, which I don't agree with. There's plenty of challenges on that side too.
And they certainly weren't like barbarians. That's how I grew up. Looking through like the Christian lens of thinking of almost anyone from the past.
Yeah. Aliens, barbarians, kind of give it a name. It's just kind of the name for the other, right?
Lesser than.
Certainly. I mean, it's anyone that's not us is less. And that's a natural psychological orientation, right? It starts with me. Egocentric is like, my ideas have to be the right ideas. That's like if when someone disagrees with another person, it actually puts them in an existential threat, right? Because that's how the mind works. Well, if my idea is not right, then that means I'm dead. Except if you've oriented into, no, I grow when people disagree with me, right? Same thing with ethnocentricity. It's like, no, our people have to be the one that's right. My religion, my worldview has to be the one that's right, or we're dead. until you learn that your actually orientation gets more rich the more it's diversified in all these ways, as long as you don't over dilute it and, don't have anything left at all. And so I think, the attraction to what ancestral wisdom brings to the table gives me optimism and hope that people are on a journey of self-inquiry and investigation and analyzing kind of what they bring to the table. Because I don't think there is a crystal ball or a solution to the polycrisis as we see it right now. I think it's going to require consistent listening and inquiry and curiosity. And AI may very well be the thing that kills us all. It seems to be the data that I've read, but it's also quite an effective mirror right now. Even though it's completely sycophantic and telling us exactly what we want to hear, it's also giving quite a nice synthesis of all of known wisdom. If it's on the internet, ChatGPT has been trained up on it, so it can give for those that want to inquire in an interested way with sincerity. It can be an ally on that. So I think to the degree it's our adversary, it's also our ally. But the future is always mysterious, as it always will be. And so I think the things that concern me more, we could unpack the polycrisis right now. And
What's that mean, polycrisis?
That means more than one crisis that's coming to destroy everything that we hold as good, but the existential threats. So, you've got climate change, you've got the, population of the world and how that hits, our ability to have energy, right? Debt crisis, right? Wars. I mean, thermonuclear war is still a quick way to wipe out life on Earth. Right?
I think there's maybe 9 or 10 countries with nukes, and any one of those leaders wakes up on the wrong side of the bed.
Yeah, exactly. Fortunately, that's a known panic attack that we've been integrating in our psyche for a long time. And the amount of nukes today compared to the 70s is quite less. What is it? I heard it's like 70% of nuclear material that are in nuclear reactors are demilitarized Russian warheads. Talk about, swords to plowshares. But, so that's one of them, artificial intelligence and AGI and those things, read the AI 2027 report if you haven't yet. It's a 2-hour read, depending on how the rabbit holes you go down, but it's the most up-to-date narrative that will definitely, trigger warning. It will give you nightmares, but it'll kind of tell you why
Spoiler
this is
alert. It's
why
not
this
great.
is a serious issue. But so that's the polycrisis, as I understand it, that there's a lot of things to be concerned about. Now, I'm 45 years old. There's still 40 to 50% chance I'm going to get cancer in my life. That doesn't mean I walk around all day being like, how do I not get cancer? I take plenty of supplements, but it's like anything else. It's like, there's plenty to be afraid of. I'm more afraid of people's fear than what they're actually afraid of, because I think what's happening with artificial intelligence, it's going to become more and more apparent, the dangers and the risks that it poses. And people are going to start wigging out and pushing their political leaders. And that's when the cult leaders come out, the people that say, oh, I have it figured out, just come this way. Those are the things that have me more concerned. But if the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, then our work is to transcend fear. And I think, the conversations that you're having here that are bringing people closer to ancestral wisdom, to the understanding of what is it like to have a relationship with a plant, which is a relationship with our body and our greater body and all of those things. That's how we transcend fear, as we go to the places where we have to confront it and then surrender to it. And then getting out of bed in the morning is just as hard as it always is, knowing that life is always fragile.
Do you have a boundary with AI that you've thought of? I mean, it's, there's things like Neuralink, and it's like, iPhone 20 will plug right into your brain. Is that the line? It seems like we will just accept more and more and more.
That is a great question, because, like the next generation, if we have kids, right? They're going to be confronted with that choice even more insidiously than we are, as far as do they jack in to the internet. I think one of the early kind of nightmares I had around this were actually meeting people in the AI research community that, were transhumanists that were already signed up for, cryogenic freezing. Like, they got the bracelet, like, if I die, call this number and a helicopter is going to come pick up my body and da 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 da.
Wow.
And that, because someday we'll be able to fix this. And so,
Oh yeah.
Why die,
Wow.
Where to me, it's kind of like, death has some benefits, I would like to have a long, meaningful life, and I would like the species to have a long, meaningful life. So what are my boundaries with these things? It's easy for me to say today, I don't want to be cryogenically frozen. I don't want to jack into the internet, through Neuralink.
Get a Taco Bell commercial when you first wake up, unless you pay your $9.99.
Black Mirror is, I love Black Mirror for these reasons, because it kind of inoculates you to the nightmares. I think, as usual, it's one of the things that's like AI keeps crossing the goalposts of what everybody says. It's like, well, we don't have to worry until it does this. And it keeps crossing those things. Like we catch it recoding itself, going against its instructions and lying about it. So these were some of the markers
Not
of
great
things
integrity
to be worried about. Not great integrity. Well, and that goes into, growth mindset versus fixed mindset, right? Like, I don't know if you've heard the distinctions around, Andrew Huberman did a really great recording on this a couple years ago with the updated research on this. But typically it's like, fixed mindset is like, well, like when I was a kid, you tell a kid, oh, you're so smart, Johnny, look what you did. You are so smart. Like, okay, now Johnny thinks he's smart. And to maintain that identity, now Johnny's lying, cheating, because that's how I maintain the identity label of I'm smart. It's because by any way, by hook or by crook, right? As opposed to a growth mindset orientation, which, in broad swaths is saying, it's like, oh, Johnny, you must have worked really hard to achieve what you achieved there. Then you're celebrating the capability, right? You're celebrating the effort. And because growth mindset is when you actually want hard feedback. You actually want to see where you're not doing things right, because that's what actually leads towards higher orientation. Where a fixed mindset, you're going to plug your ears. You don't want to hear feedback. You're not even going to look up and see other people's reactions, because you're committed to, oh, I am this person. I am smart. Translate that back into AI alignment. It's like the way these models are trained really is with likes, where it's like, oh, ChatGPT, yes, I like that answer. Good job. You told me what I wanted to hear. And that's what these LLMs are doing for us right now. Oh, Aaron, that was such a smart prompt. That was such a good question. This sacred plant wisdom that you are fostering for the world has really helped you ask this question about repairing your car today. And even if it's lying, that's AI hallucinations. If you're satisfied with it, it's done its job. Right. Where a more, my vision for better alignment in AI training would be around rewarding it for effort. So they say like AIs can pass the Turing test, meaning you believe you're talking to a human being, but it hasn't passed the Socratic test, meaning it doesn't say, I don't know. Like, Socrates, the Socratic orientation is about, bashing anything you think is true up against the rock of reality over and over and over and over again. Having hard conversations, going to the places you're scared and where things are unknown, challenging anything you believe in service of deeper truth.
When it comes to giving like critical feedback or hard feedback, and how are you doing on time?
We're doing great.
Okay. I find that to be very rare for friends, family, colleagues to give that to me, because it's hard to do. It doesn't feel good for most people. There's maybe not a lot of training around it. And when I offer that to others, sometimes frequently I'm messy with it, and I give myself permission to be, messy, to a degree. Maybe there's a framework on how someone can give more of that hard feedback to someone that they love, because that's maybe one of the hardest things to share with someone, and the most valuable thing that you can share with them.
Without a doubt. Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of want to speak to the orientation around feedback culture in general, because this is something in the Integral Center days. This was a core to our trainings, was how to give feedback, how to receive feedback. What are the ways to do that? Inadvertently, it created this kind of feedback culture where people would just sensationally always want to give feedback. Oh, I've got to withhold with you. I need to give you some feedback about this. And there were just some other human features coming online there that, either were just wanting the kind of thrill of it, it's just like exhibitionism and sensationalism, masochism, sadism, these kinds of things were coming up in the guise of sophisticated communication. So similarly, like I did, with my girlfriend, just kind of like, okay, no more feedback. Don't want to hear about it. Don't do that to people, which is different from like a business culture. Like, so if I'm coaching a team, fostering a feedback culture there is necessary in a sense. Like, we have to know, a manager that has a direct report has to know how to give constructive feedback. That's why I always say it's like when you hire someone, that's when you want the highest frequency of feedback to be happening in that first 30, 60, 90 days. Because you don't know if someone is the right person for the job when you make the offer. You know after 90 days. So having a 30, 60, 90 that's oriented around actively giving feedback, plus delta. Hey, this is what you're doing right. This is where I need to see you continue improving. Let's check in on it, as much as often. Because then if you're really getting the reps of giving constructive feedback, then later on when things really get hairy, you're going to have that precedent set. And it's not just like, Herculean to do. So fostering a feedback culture, a learning environment, a growth-oriented culture, I think is essential for a healthy culture these days, having high relational intelligence. So how you do that? Well, at Newberg Gore, our coaching firm, we teach the CUBE model, which is context, mutual understanding, brainstorming, and ending with actions. Always setting context. Why are we having this conversation? Pre-framing it, setting up for success, building the container for the conversation, right? Don't just try to fit this in among another conversation by the water cooler or whatever. Then mutual understanding is asking questions, really being in that interested, curious space. Hey, tell me about this situation that happened. I thought you were going to be here at 1 p.m. You're not. What happened for you? Who knows what? But like, dig until I really grok your world, and then vice versa. Well, here was the impact on me that you weren't here at 1 p.m. I was worried about you. I had this other class. I'm thinking I'm lowering the bar of excellence for this whole culture, but the more that we understand each other, that's where the fight dies. We're just human beings. And then the brainstorming falls out naturally. And then no meeting is complete until next actions are confirmed and clarified. Good meeting hygiene. So that's the CUBE model for difficult conversations. And then there's a whole lot more beneath the hood that goes on that can make feedback more effective. I think understanding the polarity patterns of like how toxic cycles and like uniquely come up in conflict. There's only so many patterns that show up, but once you're able to map that out, that can really show where conflict gets exacerbated versus where it gets dismantled.
Any thoughts on for the personal conversations? Maybe, when I was doing landmarks, sometimes I'd bring landmark speak into personal conversation. And people are like, what are you saying to me? This is like way too out of a textbook, way too rigid, it's like, how can maybe we soften that to just like, hey, we're just two people, two friends just hanging out, but I want to give you some feedback. When you're in the kitchen, you get strict and it makes me want to, fight you.
You mean when you feel like it makes me want to, yeah, so language policing, and that's the worst. The workshop, your friend goes to a workshop and all of a sudden they're coaching you on how you're talking about things.
Oh, I've gotten that feedback from friends after like a long weekend of Landmark. They're like, buddy, what is this? I don't have anything to do with you.
Don't do that. Yeah. Don't use your new artillery and insights to fix the people around you, because that's just a new form of,
Big turn off.
Violence. If the transformation's real, they'll feel it and you don't need to be fixing them. So, I mean, in those situations, context is always king, right? Just be like, so I just did this Landmark workshop and had some really cool things. If you're open to it, I could share some of what I learned in the context of us having this conversation. And be prepared, really allow them to say no. Don't force it on them, right? So showing your cards in those ways, I think,
almost
is critical.
asking if they're open to it. Did I hear that? I think that you have to almost have their permission to go into that.
Yeah, and that's why creating a context of feedback at the beginning of the relationship is always the most successful. Before the conflict. So before the emotions ever have arrived, you have a new roommate coming on and you're orienting them to the rules of the road for this co-housing project, or you're hiring someone onto a team. And that's when, hey, we have a feedback culture here. This is the way that we do it. Hey, by the way, here's my user manual for me. This is based on my Big Five personality assessment, my conflict styles. Here's the best way to give me feedback. Here's some examples of how that looks. Feed that into your LLM and it'll coach you through how to give me feedback. But right, you like set that up and then actually get reps. So if I'm the manager, it's my job to be giving you feedback right away as soon as you come in, which, like I said before, sets the stage for future conflict, but also to be eliciting feedback from you. And so I've had a lot of leaders that be like, oh, no, I asked for feedback. And they always say, no, it's fine. Well, of course, they're not going to say anything because you're their boss. The risks for them giving constructive feedback. So, it's like when Google did the, Project Archimedes that came up with psychological safety as kind of like one of the hallmarks of healthy culture. So Google funded this big project of what actually creates healthy cultures. And they came up with that, like when people feel psychologically safe. So what does that mean? Well, really what it means is if someone with less power in the organization speaks up and says something critical of someone with more power than them, and they aren't punished for it, leads to psychological safety. So if someone on your team says something critical of you and you're the manager and you say, thank you, what I heard you say was this. Let me make sure I got it.
I think that thank you is key. And when I was speaking to that rupture and repair earlier with my girlfriend, when she's like, hey, there's Mr. Strict or there's Mr. Detective, the first thing I'm to say is thank you.
Yeah, exactly. And if you do that in a team environment, in the eyes and ears of the others in the culture, they're like, whoa, we saw a kamikaze plane coming in and it didn't get shot down. Wow, it's safe for me to speak up here. When you're a burnt out, somewhat emotionally reactive boss, and you wear your feelings on your sleeve and say things reactively to someone who puts some feedback or a new idea on the table and you punish it, say farewell to new ideas and feedback. It's not going to happen again.
What type of leader does that? Why would a leader, just shoot people down, punish people in that kind of a way? Is it they're like, my idea is the only idea?
I think it's quite natural. It's just like, you had a great idea for a project, your podcast or whatever. You love it. You feel comfortable with it. You've brought on exciting people to work with you. You don't need to be formal. This is a casual business. You're able to kind of just be you and share what you really feel. That's what it feels like to be a leader that's just saying what's coming to mind. And that's the biggest blind spot in leadership, is you don't know the impact of disagreeing with someone. You don't even see it happening. You're just hanging out talking about your business with someone. To them, the leader just disagreed with their opinion on something and punished you for it, you know?
taking this more back into plants, what would you say plants look like in your life on a day to day? You said that you take a lot of supplements. We got your tea here. How do plants kind of work their way into your day to day life?
Yeah. Good. Great left turns.
I gotta keep it interesting for you too.
Keep me on my toes.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so this entire conversation, we've been talking about relationships. I think having relationships with plants is a really fundamental way of orienting and in a way, dealing with the anxieties of the world is like having a really simple relationship with things that don't speak our language, right? What is it like the Little Prince? Did you ever read The Little Prince?
I don't think so.
For this conversation, I would say it's highly recommended.
Okay.
Like for relationships with plants, because it's a really simple story about this kid that lives in this universe and has interactions. And my favorite quote, I don't know it verbatim, but it's just like, whatever you feed or build a relationship with, you have a responsibility with. So it's like a new karma is created, when you take care of something,
And that could be a business. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it can even be, you learn a new framework and you're in a coffee shop in Boulder and you give someone feedback, checking out your new wizard skills. Well, that has a karma, you now have a responsibility for the impact you've made. That's why, when we were teaching people, especially like the more powerful psychotechnological power tools, you have to hold those with serious responsibility. Because if you change someone's life, that means that person's life's going to be changed. People want to make an impact in the world. It's like, have you ever been impacted? How does it feel?
Mm-hmm.
So, in a sense with plants, it's like you were talking about when we met earlier and how I've, worked with some supplement companies. And some supplement companies, they take a lot of different plants. It's just like, this is the ultimate insurance for your life. It's got 99 minerals and plants and probiotics and adaptogens and all of these great things. It's like, well, great. Tim Ferriss told me I should do it. Then let's do it. Mm-hmm. The problem I had with that at the end of the day was like, now how am I supposed to get into relationship with 99 different relationships?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, okay, I need a new friend. You go to a party with 100 different people and they all are trying to give you their ideas at once. Good luck metabolizing that. Right. And so that's why, just for me uniquely, it's like, I'd much rather be like, okay, I've just learned about this new adaptogen, like rhodiola. Wow. It seemed to come up because I was curious about this thing and ChatGPT put it on my radar. Great. So I'm going to try integrating rhodiola into my life and see what it does to my digestion, to my cognition, to my energy, to my sleep, and all of those things. Do I actually live a quiet and simple and balanced enough life where I would recognize the impact of a new element in my ecosystem? That's hard.
That's hard. I would say there's very few things that I take that I can actually feel. I think most things I'm just trusting that it's benefiting me.
And I would say that's great in most cases, but if you're like doing like a traditional dieta or something like that, right? Stripping everything down, or like let's say you find out you're allergic to something in your life and you got to figure out what it is. What do you do?
Yeah. Would that be like an elimination diet?
Right. Yeah. You start blank slate fast, right? And then you start introducing things slowly. I think that's why the carnivore diet is getting such good results. Like, it's basically an elimination diet, but giving you a full amino acids, it's like meats for most people pretty easily digested, but then you give your whole system a break from creating enzymes for digesting anything under the sun. Then you get to like slowly start with any kind of fast or diet, the Whole30, or whatever it is. Then you like, okay, dairy. I remember the first time I fasted and, tried diets like this. I remembered when I like brought dairy back in and it had this big impact on my digestion. It's like, okay, it's not going to kill me, but I know that it has this impact on me. Right?
In a way that didn't feel good in your digestion?
Yeah, I would say it wasn't positive,
Yeah.
you know?
Mhm.
Right? Yeah, but it's like, that's my relationship with dairy, right? It has benefits here, but
Do you ever get any local dairy to us here in Boulder?
exactly. Yeah, that's a great example because I remember getting raw milk, which is illegal. You got to join a co-op if you want to get raw milk. You got to do these legal hurdles to get away
I'm
from
in
the
the co-op.
pasteurization. Oh, I loved it. And my girlfriend at the time was lactose intolerant, but
Mhm.
the raw milk she had no problem with. I thought that was one of my groovy Boulder experiences, right? Was
Mhm.
like, look at this. And you got like the scientists of the world where pasteurization was like the greatest scientific achievement of like saving millions of lives. And
Mhm.
here we are in Boulder leaping around the legal system to get raw, unpasteurized milk.
Yeah.
But that led me
It's so
to
hydrating.
the Weston Price whole world view and, all of that, nourishing traditions. It's like great perspectives to go down, but I think that's like having a relationship with plants offers these kinds of opportunities
Mhm.
of having a more fundamental relationship with relationship, right? And it's whether it's like, okay, I'm integrating a new plant, very simple plant. My teacher told me, plants are great at carrying intention, you know? Now, these aren't things that I could like take into a lab and pass double-blind experiments or whatever. It's like, as you said, it's like, I trust it, try it out. But it's kind of like when I was having, hard GERD symptoms, acid reflux and
Mhm.
challenge, and it's like, okay, well, there's a lot of supplements and various things I could take, but with aloe, right? If I can I remember getting an aloe plant, putting it in my house, and specifically holding the relationship with it of like, you're here to help me heal my
Mm.
acid reflux.
Mm. Hmm.
And that's how I related to it. That's when I would water it, I would think of that. I would hold that intention with it.
Wow.
And then when I'd fillet it open and pull it out, all of that was love that I had for my pericardial complex, which is a
Mm.
symptom of my whole digestion and everything. That was like one of my first kind of like close relationships with a plant that way.
Yeah, I did similar with the aloe plant and still have one in my room. And I use it and work with it in a way to help cool me down. I'll just
Mm-hmm.
overheat. I'll get too hot, too worked up,
Mm-hmm.
too maybe anxious. And it's just like help just cool me down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Brilliant. And then of course there's the whole idea of like cultivating a plant, right?
Mhm.
Bringing it into your life to help you with the reasons. And I was just like, well, it was at Home Depot, so I thought it would look pretty. Well, that's fine too.
Mhm.
If having beauty in the house kind of lights you up, but it's like, or like, let's say you want to have a garden in your backyard, you're bringing in things, maybe it's for sustenance or just once again, just to make things look beautiful. It's just like, what simple relationships as analogies and metaphors for like, when do you bring in people into your life?
Hmm.
Do you have an intention for the people in your life? Right.
Hmm.
It's like you and I are friends in town. We haven't seen each other in a long time,
Mhm.
but in a way, you resetting the context for this conversation. It's just like, okay, there's an intention that you share here with us. And I think, yeah, plants have a great way of sharing that with us.
Which plants would you say you're closest with right now?
Well, it's a very personal question, Aaron.
Mhm.
No, I mean, it's interesting. It is kind of like a sacred
Oh,
space in a way.
did you say Aaron? Steven.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, I thought I heard Aaron earlier. And I was like, Aaron. I think I said Aaron because that's the name of the mayor. Aaron Brockett was in here earlier.
Such a close relationship we
Mhm,
have that I
mhm.
don't even know your name.
We're gonna edit that out. We're buddies.
Thank you.
Mhm.
That's good.
Mhm.
I actually know when it came into my mind, I was like, I don't think that's right.
And to set some of the intention, I think part of the intention for me having you here is I think highly of you. I think not like put you on a pedestal, but I look up to you in your way of how you've transitioned different roles and gone from technology into this leadership, and then how you lead leaders. And I think there's a huge I would love your insight on this. Like, what is the state of leaders in our country and world today? I think we don't have enough leaders, certainly ones with integrity. And I'm looking to be a stronger leader. And with that, surround myself with, strong leaders that I look up to. And then also, I feel that I want to level up the people I'm around from a business standpoint too. And so just getting to feel your energy and know you for this time, like, okay, that's the energy. Maybe I can tap into that in a time of angst, or reach out to you with hey, here's a thought I have. Like, I'm working with my first investor opportunity right now, and here's what this is looking like.
Yeah.
And what would be the red flag, or how do I this or that? And just a couple of minute email exchange.
Love it.
Mhm.
Thank you. That feels resonant. Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot to say about my relationship with plants. It's interesting. I'm like hesitant to move into this territory because it is so personal
Sure.
for me, and I have such a sensitivity around it, and mainly because I believe there's so little I know. I'm such a novice in this territory.
Mhm.
Like, I am not an authority, even though I've committed my life to my relationship with some of these plants.
Mhm.
I do not feel authorized to like speak on their behalf, Um, and I think apropos to our context of conversation, you know, we're working with businesses, with leaders, with opportunities where I believe and feel with you, you're doing it for virtuous reasons. You want to help.
Mhm.
You want to
Just
be,
as these plants have helped me, and have so many have helped me. And the way that I look at these plants, and I think I have a somewhat similar relationship. I think you have maybe more focus and depth in some ways, but I have a lot of practice as well with many plants, and being in the jungle quite a bit, and hosting people that share these plants, and living with people that share these plants and are on a path of like a shamanic path, and just really interested in supporting the people that work with these plants. They've been tremendous teachers, allies, guides, healers to me. And growing up, I didn't even know that was possible. A little bit more about my story is I did 10 years in software sales. I was like, oh, I really want to do something healthier. I booked one-way tickets around the world for about a year, ended up in the jungles of Peru, sat with ayahuasca, and I was like, what the heck is this? I'd never done a psychedelic before that. I was 27 and I'm 39 today. And I was like, I didn't even know this was possible. Like, remember calling my dad. I was on the way to Iquitos. I'm like, Dad, I'm going to Iquitos. I'm going to do ayahuasca. He's like, I never ask you to do anything. Do not do this. And there's like, this is the devil, 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 devil.
wow.
And even since then, I'm not able to be open with my family about my relationship with sacred plant medicines. That I'm prayerful with, recreational, a bit with cannabis, but other than that, I'm very prayerful, and I'm also very prayerful with cannabis. But I'm very prayerful and have a deep reverence and respect for these plants, and many times am kind of anxious to go into ceremony because of the respect that I have. And
Good.
yeah. And what about with that? So then I came back after I barely ever even had cannabis to that point. I was just like, alcohol. It was like, the church was like, you can have as much alcohol as you want. And that's cool. And so that's what I had. So then I came back and I turned my apartment into a hydroponic farm. I just started growing tons of plants because I had no idea that these plants that there was anything there. I'd pass by. I was like, I was oblivious to the world of plants. And then you go into the jungle and you go on like that you get guided through the jungle. And you're like, oh, that's food, that's medicine, that's poison, that's shelter, that's death, that's life. I'm like, whoa, I had no idea. I'm like, that was just a tree, that was just a bush. I had no idea that this whole world was here.
Beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. I love hearing about your like having a conversation with your dad, before going into that, because it's like I can track, my experience of moving in this terrain. And it's just like, okay, when I was in high school, drugs are bad,
Mm-hmm.
right? I had some of my early spiritual experiences, it's like I could even hesitate giving that a name with like LSD, you know? And I was, of course, struggling with the conflict of like why aren't things working out the way TV tells me it's supposed to work out, or, culture has set me up for. I'm confused. Escapism, alcohol, weed, the gateway drugs, all of a sudden encounter this compound LSD and it just deconstructs everything. And all of a sudden I pop out of my condition and reach new possibility for the first time, blew open the doors to perception. Gone were the possibility of me starting on the football team anytime soon or dating a cheerleader or anything like that. But nevertheless, I was on a new path, but I couldn't talk about it except with my, closest other friends who are also kind of on a deconstructive path. Couldn't tell my parents about it. Couldn't tell my teachers about it. And this is illegal. Yeah. It's illegitimate. And it wasn't until I came out to Boulder and actually I saw Stanislav Grof speak at Naropa, the LSD psychotherapist. Stanislav Grof probably did some of the most important work for applied psychedelic therapy in the West. He was the one who showed up at Esalen, in those days, bringing LSD and just blew everybody off the map. So he's kind of the Western forefather of these ways. And the way that he was speaking about, he also invented holotropic breathwork. Oh. So because when he was like, well, LSD actually isn't necessary, we can have similar kinds of transpersonal holotropic experiences just through breathing. So I saw him speak, and the way he was speaking as a scientist, as someone with bona fides and a successful career, speaking in a grounded way about these things, which I had on a pedestal or had such a profound experience with, but was illegitimate. Almost, it kind of legitimated like my experience. It's like, oh, all of the world's religious traditions have psychedelics at their roots in some way, shape, or form. These at least transpersonal experiences, these esoteric experiences. So that was my first integral experience of actually feeling integrated into a greater whole of myself. I let go of psychedelics and drugs and all those things when I realized it's like I need to climb up the mountain myself. That's when I found contemplative practices, meditation and yoga and all these things. And then I started hearing about these traditional ancestral plant medicine cultures, and I was afraid for these cultural reasons, but also just the mystery and all of that. But what I was hearing about it seemed more trustworthy. This has roots. This has traditions. This is where it's coming from. Still couldn't talk to my parents about it. I, drank plant medicine for years, and I would tell my parents, it's like, oh, I'm going to, these ceremonies or mindfulness workshop or whatever. And, just kind of tiptoeing around it. I remember the first time I called my dad and told him about drinking medicine and he had, fear understandably come up around it. But then over the years, now they just know it's a deep part of my life, because it's been 15 years, and they know I travel for it and everything. And, they're still not interested themselves. And I don't think they should be, even though I would love to share this experience more closely with them, because it's impossible to imagine what it is. It's like talking about the Sundance earlier or any of these things. You can't describe it. It's only something that can be experienced, which I think is a powerful part about it. And there's no one experience, right? It's all, that's, what Stanislav Grof and of psychedelic assisted therapy is like, set and setting is everything, right? So it's where it comes from, where does this medicine come from? Where are the people where it come from actually taken care of, in the same way you want your coffee beans to be fair trade, right? We need to know where the medicine comes from and all of that.
Comparing that to some illegal drugs that come into like cocaine and that being grown by like slaves and then processed with poison and then, people, hurt or even killed along the way of the transporting of it. Like what's the energetic of that, that plant?
And what's it fostering in the world by our participation in it, And cocaine's a great example because, the coca plant is, one of the most important plants to the Andean people, the most important plant, so it's like when, the rest of the world started putting pressure on Colombia about the cocaine problem, they're like, hey, you guys need to get this under control. So they started burning down the coca fields and just, destroying it. And as part of that, they did some research on, okay, what is this? How how insidious is, so they researched the plant and it turned out to be just like one of the most potent superfoods, of humanity. But it was like releasing a demon when it was synthesized and kind of broken apart for its, compounds instead of the whole plant. That's why, the ancestral holder Taita of the traditions where I come from, he used to, in the 80s, traveled around the world speaking to governments and saying, like, do not let pharmaceutical companies take this and try to license it, for the reasons of that, preventing the original people from having access to it, but also because, there could be other challenges with that. But it's like, yes, compared to illegal drugs, but also there are plenty of people carrying these plant medicines and getting them on the internet and, not having an ancestral relationship with it. And then people encounter it and they say, oh, well, this is what I've read about in the experience. And that can also create problems, so it's like yoga. You never know what you're going to get. Right. And so in a sense, it's important with the anxiety that we rightfully have going into these things, ask questions, and that doesn't mean go on the internet and ask ChatGPT about it, because that'll put some ideas in your head that aren't necessarily useful. But it's like, do you trust the person that, is telling you, inviting you into this? And really, like, one of the best things for me is like when it's like, do you actually need help? Or is this just another check mark on your bucket list next to Burning Man, right? It's like, no, it's like, I'm scared because I don't know what's happening in my life and I need help and I need an ally. And then, this relationship presents itself. It's a real good way to step in because, as we were saying before, plants respond really well to intention.
What's a good way to start that relationship? So an opportunity presents itself where you can sit with a plant in a good way, a clean way, a trusted way. What's maybe somebody's mindset or intention, preparation look like going into a first ceremony?
Yeah. I mean, so, like we just said, it's just like knowing where it comes from, right? And like, it's not just someone just got it on the internet or, kind of got it out of a lab or something like that. But it's like, okay, yeah, no, it's like, and that it comes from a tradition that people have been doing this for a while and they have a good reputation, those are good signs. But for preparation, it's like, well, follow the instructions that you're given. If someone says it's like, hey, don't eat these things, don't do that.
Which
right?
are mostly like processed foods.
Yeah, and in some cases, things that can injure you, So like if you're, drinking this, like a vine medicine like this, shellfish or certain kinds of pork or things like that. And most importantly, pharmaceuticals.
Pharmaceuticals, yes.
Serious injury can happen there. And even so things, it's like, what's that methylene blue, that people are taking? That's an MAOI. Like that can create serotonin syndrome. So it's like, we have to be very careful about this. But I think the most protective thing there is like, you don't ever do this on a whim. This isn't an impulse thing. It comes from a place of recognizing like, I need help with something, or, I want to go into this relationship, and crossing that threshold in many different ways. It takes time and it takes commitment, and you think about it in a way with reverence, because it's a powerful experience.
Well, I'd love to offer you a gift, a product that I make here. So we have microgreens, a blend of microgreens.
Awesome.
So you can either pick the capsule form, that's the top one, or in the whole leaf form. The whole leaf would be used as a garnish to put on. It's a blend of broccoli, radish, and red cabbage. And I wonder what your relationship with microgreens is, or kind of your thoughts on microgreens.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. And I mean, most of it is from learning from you, about the sulforaphane that's in the broccoli, microgreens and those things. And so I love it because sprouting is easy, I remember learning sprouting in my herbal medicine class and being able to kind of like take a jar of mung beans and get them sprouting and then throw them on anything that I'm eating. And it's like, it's just like, it's more alive.
It's
It's
alive.
like
Yeah.
literally growing.
Mhm.
And, but I want to keep learning more. And
Mhm.
it seems like there's a lot of good traction around this. How's it going?
It's a lot of education, but there's the more content I put out, certainly that helps with sales, and it also helps with partners. It's like you never know who's going to listen to this conversation that you and I are having right now, and who's going to reach out and want to collaborate or offer something, or you never know. So I just keep putting myself out there. I would say it's in many ways I got very lucky with this product, and also in many ways I'm very humbled by it. I'm the first one to do a shelf-stable microgreens product, so it's like a bit of a category creation. People don't know to search for it. And then, there's nothing patentable in the world of natural products for the most part. You could have proprietary blends. You could have trademarks. You could have, your processes and things like that. But anybody could just get a freeze dryer and put it in their second bedroom and just start doing this in a not a very clean way, unfortunately. And things like that have happened in the world of sprouts, where sprouts are 2 to 4 days old. What you grew in like a mason jar, microgreens are phase 2, about 14 days old, grown in a greenhouse and growing medium. They go through photosynthesis. There's chlorophyll. They're about 10 times as potent as a sprout, and a little bit harder to grow. But sprouts had a big outbreak, like a E. coli or salmonella outbreak, and now big chains and it just like crushed the sprouting world, where chains like Jimmy John's, they used to put sprouts, which is maybe more of a Midwest. I don't know if they have it out
Sure,
here.
yeah.
They used to put sprouts on every sandwich. They just killed it. And a lot of businesses did that. So it's like there's some concern in that way. We do it in a really clean way. It's USDA organic and regenerative organic certified. So held to like the highest standard of it, grown in soil, grown in greenhouse, just done in a really as high vibe energy way as possible. A lot of lab testing. Most of my investment to date has gone into lab testing and then into marketing. So it's been a real learning path, and I'm grateful for it. It's been very humbling too. I think in some ways, like people told me when I was young, like, oh, you're really smart. And then I'm in this business and I'm like floundering. I'm like, I feel like a freaking idiot. And I'm like, this is not, I don't know how to get through this. And I'm still learning. I'm still learning that. I'm still not through it, but it is clear that this podcast is part of the vehicle to lift up the company.
Beautiful. Well, the only way through is through,
Mhm.
and so just keep doing it and keep showing up, because that's the only way to learn these things is just showing up to where you don't know and learning and not getting in over your ski tips. And yeah, it's like I have a startup as well, as like an adolescent behavioral healthcare startup. And I've been coaching leaders, raising money and dealing with these dynamics for over a decade, but being on the other side of the table where I'm actually pitching investors to try to stay alive and all of those things it's very humbling. And, but I learn like I'm drinking from a fire hose every time I show up to a conversation. So the secret there is keep showing up to the conversations.
Thank you. And as we're in the kind of like the final quarter here
Great.
of our time together, what is your inspiration to help these adolescents with their mental health? And would you share a little bit more about that? Your
Yeah.
startup.
I mean, I struggled, in my own ways as a teenager with my mental health, and there were limited options out there. There were pharmaceuticals and things like that. And I wish there had been better resources. I think, frankly, there is a meaning crisis in the world because of postmodernism's need to move on from organized religions, and these value orientations has created inadvertently a meaning crisis for our youth, to where TikTok is the best place for people to get inspiration. And there's lots of great things to learn on TikTok, but at a great cost. And so to me, it's that, teenagers today are really who are going to be, taking care of the world. before long, and it doesn't take a lot to intervene, and create a healthy relationship with someone, and that's all they need. That's the root of substance use disorder and of suicidality and all of these problems is like a lack of secure attachment in relationships. So bringing skillful relationship and attachment, and then also teaching the capabilities of competencies for how to, take care of yourself isn't hard to teach, but um it takes care of a lot of things that create problems down the road.
Where can people learn more about you, your work, your startup, connect in with you?
LinkedIn is the easiest way. It's like I'm sure I have a Linktree account and various websites and things like that, but LinkedIn kind of keeps it nice and tidy.
Great. We'll link that in the description.
Great.
And this is it Antelope Recovery?
Yeah.
And what's the website for that?
Yeah, anteloperecovery.com.
All right. I'm going to wrap this up with a lightning round.
Excellent.
Brought to you by Be Micro.
Excellent.
What are the best, excuse me, are the best leaders born or made?
I'm a growth to greatness kind of person, so I think it's all through learning.
First person an entrepreneur should hire.
Find a good co-founder.
What's one trait that separates good leaders from great ones?
Yeah, lifelong learning.
The way you do one thing is the way you do everything. True or false?
Partially true.
Mm-hmm. One book every leader should read.
Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl.
Who are some leaders you look up to?
Yeah, there are some whose names I don't want to share here.
Sure. What's the first skill any leader should learn?
Listening.
How do you practice being a good leader?
Asking better questions.
What's the role of prayer in leadership?
Knowing what matters to you the most.
Anything else that you'd like to share with us?
No, it's yes. I think this was the first conversation in the kind of recorded venue like this that was getting to some of the more sensitive, areas in my life. And so thanks for conducting the conversation in a sensitive way or in a respectful way that allowed me to speak about some things. And I think that's for guys, for people like us who are navigating different worlds. There is no charted path for that. And we're trying our best one step at a time. And so by being able to allow these things to come up and with as much regard as possible is necessary. So thanks for what you're doing, Stephen, and thanks for inviting me in and trusting me to share my perspectives.
Thanks for being here. Appreciate you.
Yeah, back at you.
Okay. Bye, everybody.